Welcome to the 700 Club. We're delighted to have you with us. We've got a lot of things coming up on this program today, but we'll start off with a tropical storm which is stalking the east coast of America with North Carolina in its crosshairs. It's bringing torrential rains, high winds, and to millions along the I-95 corridor. The big question, how strong will it be when it hits? George Thomas has more.
After barely skirting the Florida peninsula, Isaias is expected to make the turn north, striking near the South and North Carolina border overnight. The National Weather Service warning residents along the coastal communities of the Carolinas to prepare for significant flooding from heavy rain and high winds that could possibly bring down power lines and trees. Mandatory evacuations for several North and South Carolina coastal areas sent vacationers packing ahead of the storm.
Disappointed and frustrated and sad.
North Carolina's governor issuing a state of emergency for portions of his state as forecasters say 70-mile-per-hour winds could hit the Outer Banks as the storm comes ashore.
We know how to plan, prepare, and respond when it's over. Nothing about that has changed.
Folks in Delaware and as far north as Rhode Island also on alert, as forecasters expect the fast-moving storm to bring heavy rainfall, strong winds, and storm surge to some areas later in the week. Meanwhile, Floridians breathing a sigh of relief after a weekend Isaias brushed the state's eastern coast Sunday with minimal damage. And for the first time in 45 years,
splashdown.
2 NASA astronauts returned to Earth in this kind of a dramatic fashion after spending 2 months at the International Space Center. Their capsules splashed into the calm Gulf waters off the Pensacola coast Sunday as Tropical Storm Isaias was pounding the state's Atlantic coast. The astronauts were part of Elon Musk's ambitious SpaceX project that hopes to carry people to and from orbit in the not-too-distant future. George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, our good friend Joe Bastardi of Weatherbell Analytics is with us today. Joe, welcome again to the program. Glad to see you, buddy.
Well, always a pleasure. I'd still say you should have me on when there's a big high-pressure system over the area, so I'm not associated with bad weather over here.
Okay. Well, listen, is this going to turn into a hurricane? And if it does, how powerful do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. Let's put it this way. I think there's going to be hurricane conditions, at least with wind gusts and squalls, all the way up to Long Island with this. Over our company at Weatherbell has been saying we thought this stay east of Florida and that the big problem would be intensification as it came to the coast, to the Carolinas. Is an interesting situation going on where even though the storm is moving north, a weaker storm like this is capable of maintaining itself or even increasing a bit on its way north, as opposed to a powerful storm that would weaken coming into the same pattern. Okay, so it's almost like what's good for the goose is not good for the gander or vice versa here. So, tomorrow morning at this time, it's going to be very close or right over top of Tidewater, and I think there are going to be hurricane-force wind gusts there, probably out of the south and southeast, be near Atlantic City by noon and up near Islip, Long Island by tomorrow evening, and then race into New England and off the charts. And the other system that's south of Bermuda will recurve to the east of Bermuda, and we'll probably get a 7 to 10 day period where not much is going on in the tropics, so we could catch our breath a little bit.
How much damage do you think it'll cause?
Well, I never make an estimate on that, but I think they're going to be 80 to 100 mile an hour wind gusts with the storm where it makes landfall. Pamlico Sound, Outer Banks, probably Virginia Beach, Atlantic City, Long Island. So that the problem with that is if it's out of the southeast rather than the northwest, a southeast wind is more damaging to trees. You go out and look at your trees, a lot of them lean to the south and southeast because the sun gets up in the east and comes around. So naturally, the trees grow toward light. And so what happens is when that wind comes in out of that direction, it tends to cause more damage. We had more damage in the eastern United States with Tropical Storm David in 1980, more tree damage, than we did with Hurricane Gloria, which was a Category 2-3 hurricane, but was offshore and the wind was blowing out of the northwest when it was strongest. And there'll be 4 to 6 inches, locally 8 inches of rain. And folks, what happens is when the storm makes landfall, the heavy rain is with and west of the path. The the highest winds are with and east of the path. So you'll see that go on all the way up the eastern seaboard. So the track becomes problematic. If it cuts up a little bit west of some of these coastal installations, they get worse winds. If it cuts east, maybe not as much wind, but heavier rains. Right now, the heaviest rains are pointed right up Richmond, Philadelphia, New York City, right up that I-95 corridor.
What's next coming up? You see anything in the forecast?
Well, there's a feature south of Bermuda we think has a shot of becoming Josephine, but it will be weak and recurve out to sea. Then I think we get 7 to 10 days where it tapers off, so to speak. But we've been saying since you had me on first, this was going to be a big season. When it ramps up late August and September, there's another cycle that favors the Atlantic basin. And these storms will be stronger than what we've seen so far when that happens.
Well, Joe, thank you very much. We look forward to having you back with the next round. Joe Bastardi. Thanks a lot, old buddy.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Pat.
Well, in other news, a double standard. Guess what? Twitter is monitoring President Trump's political posts. So what's the big deal? Well, why hasn't it taken action against Iran's Ayatollah, who has called for the destruction of Israel? A double standard. John Jessup has more.
Pat, the question of hypocrisy in social media hit the world stage in Israel's parliament last week. Members asked a Twitter rep why some political messages are flagged while Iran's supreme leader freely tweets for Israel's destruction. CBN's Chris Mitchell brings us the story.
While the hearing took place in Israel's Knesset, it didn't take long to get the attention of the White House.
It tells you where these social media companies stand, where they're not willing to assess the Ayatollah Khomeini's tweets, but they are willing to assess President Trump's tweets. It's really appalling.
McEnany says the administration plans to take action.
The administration is submitting a petition to the FCC for proposed regulatory changes to hold social media companies accountable for their censorship.
It all began with a simple question from international human rights attorney Arsen Ostrovsky to a Twitter official.
Why have you not flagged the tweets of Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei, who has literally called for the genocide of Israel and the Jewish people?
So we have an approach to world leaders that presently say that direct interactions with fellow public figures, comments on political issues of the day, or foreign policy saber-rattling on military economic issues are generally not in violation
calling
of
for
our
genocide is okay, but commenting on politics is not, just so we understand. I just want to fine-tune the question. Calling for genocide on Twitter is okay, but commenting on political situations in certain countries is not okay?
So if a world leader violates our rules, but it is a clear interest in keeping that up on the service, we may place it behind a notice that provides some more context about the violation and allows people to click through if they wish to see that type of content.
After Twitter's reply, Ostrovsky described to CBN News the reaction from a people all too familiar with genocide.
It was jarring that she can go there and to our faces, to a room full of Israelis and Israeli Jews, try and justify how someone's call for our death, for the genocide of our very state, is somehow acceptable political discourse, or the words that she used, commentary on political issues of the day.
He calls Twitter's policy a blatant double standard.
Where they flag the tweets of President Trump, but not on Khamenei. And if they want to flag Trump, that's up to them. Okay, that's their issue. But if you're going to do that, you have to be, equal. You have to apply the same kind of standards to everyone else.
Ostrovsky supports free speech, but says there's no place where Twitter should support Khamenei's calls for genocide.
When you turn your back to this hatred, you become an enabler. When you allow your platform to be used by those directly calling for violence and genocide, you become an enabler, and that's unacceptable.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat?
I believe in freedom of the press. We all know that. I mean, the press should be free to express what it wants to. But a public utility, on the other hand, needs to get regulated because they provide a service to everybody. your electric company isn't free to charge one group one set of rules, rates, and then another group a different set. That is against the regulations that have been set up ever since the whole matter of John Rockefeller and the Standard Oil Company. He was getting preferred rates on shipping his oil because he shipped more than somebody else, and therefore he had an unfair advantage over his competition, and he gobbled them all up. And so they passed various laws, the Sherman antitrust laws and others similar to that, to prevent that from happening. Now, if Twitter is independent and like a newspaper, and it just serves the subscribers, then it has a free right to say what it wants to. But if it becomes a utility, where it's serving everybody, it's a platform for everybody, but now it's discriminating against one class of people versus another, it's got to be regulated because it's now become a utility. And I think it's time for the FCC to act in that fashion. These people like Facebook and others are so big, and they are utilities. They're no longer like private newspapers or private radio stations or private television stations. They are a utility, and utilities need to be regulated. So if they want to get to become a platform, as they are, then it's time for action. And we cannot allow Twitter. Imagine the hypocrisy of somebody talking to a group of Jews to say, well, we think that genocide is okay, but discussion of your opponent in an election in Israel is not. I mean, this is nonsense, John.
Pat, the Trump administration is set to take what it calls new action in regard to Chinese software companies it sees as a threat to national security. This comes after President Trump announced Friday that he will ban TikTok, a popular Chinese video app. Speaking on Fox News Sunday Futures program, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said TikTok and other software firms are sending users' personal information to China's security forces.
This could be their facial recognition pattern. It could be information about their residents, their phone numbers, their friends, who they're connected to. Those are the issues that President Trump's made clear we're going to take care of. These are true national security issues.
Microsoft is in talks with a Chinese company to buy the U.S. arm of TikTok, which operates in the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Well, July was the worst month on record for the coronavirus here in the United States, with 1.9 million new cases recorded and 22 states now seeing a rise in cases. Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx says it's spreading to new areas of the country.
What we're seeing today is different from March and April. It is extraordinarily widespread. To everybody who lives in a rural area, you are not immune or protected from this virus.
Over the weekend, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi publicly criticized Dr. Birx, saying, quote, no, she has no confidence in her. The reason? The speaker accuses the president of spreading misinformation about the virus. And Pat, Dr. Birx is his appointee.
Well, I think Dr. Birx is an eminent physician, and for Nancy Pelosi to criticize the fact that she's warning people about this virus, this is she's stepping way over the line. The president has made enough mistakes trying to be the medical executive of America, and I think if he stopped that, it would do him a lot of good. But Nancy Pelosi is even worse. To assume that the woman who is giving factual data about the danger of this terrible coronavirus is somehow a flack for the White House. That is outrageous. John?
Pat, a massive fire is consuming more than 20,000 acres in Southern California. Triple-digit temperatures and high wind gusts are feeding the flames. 2,200 firefighters are battling the fire, and more than 7,000 people had to evacuate their homes. Investigators are looking into arson as a possible cause. And Pat, I heard just this morning that the fire is only 5% contained.
Well, it's just terrible. The Santa Ana winds are coming in, and they say it's triple-digit temperatures, and the fields are dry, and it's just burning like out of control. And it's really tough.
Praying for the homeowners there. It's
it's unbelievable.